Hello, I'm Bartek from the Stream, and I want to invite you to our latest episode of podcast AI and Data Talks. Today we'll be talking about AI agents in sales field, and specifically about voice agents. So if you're interested in building such a robust solution for your organization, you don't want to skip this episode. Welcome to AI and Data Talks, our podcast dedicated to leaders interested in mastering AI and data. Today we'll be talking about AI-powered sales and specifically about voice agents. And our guest today is Magda.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Nice to be here again.
So Magda, there's the first question. Why sales becomes the primary adopter of AI?
Yes, that's a very interesting topic. And I can't really stress enough how sales is a perfect use case. The main thing is that sales is a 0-1 work, basically. It works or it doesn't, right? So it's very easy to assess the results, the outcome of especially the AI adoption. The other thing is that sales has this kind of repetitive tasks that you can really automate and see the result, multiply your work. And then there's also the creative job and the social job where you have to interact with people. So it has so many aspects that you can really test and play with the AI and see the outcome and really measure it in the end with the volume of sales, right?
Yeah, so how does AI change the quality of sales?
It changed, in my opinion, tremendously because it switched kind of the effort from analyzing, preparing for sales meetings into actually having more of those sales, actual sales work, right? So it's no longer about, trying to understand the customer, gathering information, spending a lot of time really behind the scenes, organizing everything for yourself to be ready for a customer meeting. When then with AI, you can actually do a lot of things simultaneously, right? On the job, especially if we think of field sales, which is a very specific topic, and we also had a lot of conversations and materials about it, and we work on such products. So in field sales, it's even multiplied because then you don't need to prepare yourself the day before doing the job the next day. You actually can do everything when you're traveling, when you're just on the way to the customer. So that's definitely a huge change in the way people work right now.
Yeah, and why voice is specifically useful for sales teams?
I think the voice is a great, mode for salespeople because it brings out what's actually the natural in this environment, right? The salespeople are, from their nature, very social creatures. So the fact that you can interact with something that can be kind of like your companion, like the second person on the same job, like your junior assistant, and you can really leverage the kind of the way you can interact with other person, then you can interact with a voice agent. I think it brings out a lot of qualities of a salesperson and a sales kind of type of work.
Is voice just a new type of convenient input, or does it enable new experiences?
Actually, it enables totally new experience, and obviously depending on the job, but the most kind of vivid example I have right now is in a field sales, right? So imagine that you're kind of a salesperson, you go into the store, you're trying to communicate with the store manager, explain the placement of the products on the shelves. And then you're bringing all this information that you're ready basically to answer all the questions. You have all the information. What's the stock out of the product. You also know exactly in the moment what kind of changes you have to make to the shelf. And then your job is less kind of transactional. You're not coming as a kind of a salesperson. You're coming more like a consultant. So you have all the answers that person in a store, the store manager would like to have also for themselves. So I think it's a kind of a new kind of a way of thinking of a sales job as well.
So let's talk about the first deployment path. So sales reps interacting with a voice agent, and there is a question: how does that look like across different sales models?
Yes. So when we think of voice agents, we usually think of this kind of the second type of example where you actually have a customer interacting with like a voice IP solution. But in that case, we're thinking of more as an AI, as an assistant. So it's a voice bot that is actually assisting a salesperson on the job. And I think this kind of type of usage is maybe less popular and something that people don't think often as a kind of the first solution or first implementation of VoiceBot, but it's actually super interesting because it changes the kind of the work of a salesperson. Then you're getting like an additional person that sits next to you, we can say that way, and helps you really to navigate your daily work. So for example, when you have a call with a customer, you can quickly, not necessarily maybe the voice, but through the text, ask a couple of questions that will help you to guide your conversation with a customer in the moment. In the right direction, right? And also, incredibly important fact is the coaching on the job. So usually in a sales job, the coaching is something that happens after or maybe before the sales calls. In that case, when you actually have all the information like right with you, when you're on the call with a customer, it can actually guide you and help you really direct the conversation in the right place. So it's a great coaching tool that actually is doing the on-the-job job in that case, yeah.
Yeah, so what kind of impact does this have on how sales reps spend their time?
It has tremendous impact basically on making the job more about selling, less about preparing for the job. And I think there's something in the sales job which is obvious, typical for like people who are really great at sales. They really love talking to the customers and actually doing the selling. Those salespeople who are, let's say, maybe less accomplished in the sales field, they rather hide behind this kind of, repetitive tasks. So the AI really brings to the front who's the best salesperson, because then you don't have this administrative work to hide yourself behind. You actually have to sell. You have to actually go out and talk to the customer. So that's the biggest shift and impact.
Let's talk a little bit about the second path. So the second path is where a client actually is interacting with this voice agent. So there is a question, how does that work in general sales context?
Yes, so this is more typical. So when we talk to our potential clients who wants to build voice agents, that's usually the use case they bring, right? I want to have a voice bot that I can actually put as a kind of a front end to my customers. So any kind of info lines everywhere where actually the customer calls and we have trying to help him or help her, that's the kind of a use case we usually typically think of when we talk about voice agents. And in that field, I think we usually estimate the importance of like making it human. And I think what's the most important in this case is making it efficient and really doing the job, right? So let's say from my experience having a problem with this locker, right? When you have a delivery package locked on the street in this kind of a, steel lockers, and then you're trying to withdraw your package and something happens, and in that moment you actually have to call someone, right? So when you're calling, you don't expect the voice agents to be like very human. You don't expect it to understand you. You don't expect like to know your name right away, right? That's a kind of a different, you expect different experience. You expect it's going to do the job for you. So I think we have to think of this use case where the voice agents is doing the job for us, basically, right? So it's efficient, and it's answering your question, and it's having the answers to your questions and the opening the locker, and you don't really care if it's a voice bot or if it's a person, right?
Does this bring new opportunities for clients? I mean, new opportunities which are unreachable for ordinary chat-based solutions.
Yeah, I mean, if we think of that, what's the opportunity for a client? In general, voice bot, chatbots, what they actually do for us is that we know there is no human person on the other side, if I can say that way. What does it mean? it's that we no longer think of like this kind of a social aspect of like conversation, communication. We're trying to like cut everything to the core of our conversation. So that's exactly what I said before about the experience with the package, right? So what the voice bots actually bring, they bring this kind of clarity and communication. So basically, I can imagine that people will be more willing to give a feedback. People will be more willing to exactly say what they need from the chatbot, actually, right? So the fact that it's the interaction with something more artificial, it's actually a benefit in many kind of use cases where when we have a human on the other side, it's slightly harder to communicate. But obviously, there are also different implementations when this kind of a human aspect is extremely important. So I cannot imagine, like in a medical solution, to have a voice bot or something that is not at least a little bit programmatically empathetic with a patient, right? So it all depends on the use case. But we cannot measure every single voice bot the same way, that it has to be very human, very empathetic. Like it depends how we want to implement that. And with the state of the technology we have right now, we can tune it in the direction that fits our customers the best. Can be more human, less human, more robotic, more natural. It all depends what we need, and the technology really allows that kind of a spectrum of adoption.
Yeah, and what does this voice sales agent needs under the hood to be considered as a robust solution for a client?
I cannot stress enough, and I'm repeating that all over in the conversation, that VoiceBot is nothing without the data behind it. So the most important is to have access to all the systems that you need, where the knowledge sits, right? So the VoiceBot without that is just a kind of LLM that you can talk to, nothing really fancy. And then you can actually access the data, access the knowledge of your company, access the information about your customer, and also like move it even farther, make it more agentic so it can actually do work for us, right? It can actually save the information back to the system. So it really, there is this element of it interacting with our data in both directions. That's what makes it really useful.
And can you provide some concrete examples of these tools, the solutions across different sales environments?
Yes. So for example, when we think of SaaS solutions, when we're selling SaaS, so it's a high volume sales, low value. So there is a lot of focus on like prioritization, having the quick access to the information, which kind of deals are the more promising. So imagine the kind of salesperson has like a 300 deals open, because it's a very small value of every single deal, but you have to know which person to call back, right? If you want to if you want to really have this kind of a small sales done properly. And then when we think of like a B2B sales, the kind of use case can be like trying to understand the risks and the objections of a customer, right? So you have less deals, you don't really need the prioritization tool to help you out during the day to decide which customer to call, because you have maybe 3 or 4 opportunities open, but it actually can assist you to like lower the risk of like having the conversation go not into the direction that you are willing to. So those kind of examples, and obviously the field sales is like a super interesting for VoiceBot, because it's like a very mobile job. So you can imagine how many opportunities you may have with that. So like you're in the store, you taking the photo of a shelf, you're getting right away information back from the system, like what is the perfect planogram, and it's just like changing your job, in the moment.
And what's the role of data access here? So the role of data access in the context of making this agent truly useful?
I mean, accessing data is a kind of a crucial part, right? We can think of like from the security perspective, but obviously the access from the perspective of like what kind of data we are accessing. So it can be CRM systems, any system of record. Basically, it's kind of something that makes those voice agents really grounded in data. Like grounding, it's a well-known word in the AI world. Means that basically you don't only have the the knowledge of the LLM model that was trained on, but you actually can double check it with the data of your company, right? So it's like a crucial element. Without having the access to data, those voice bots can really hallucinate and just give you the answer from the general context of knowledge, not from the context of your company.
Yeah, so everything is about trust, and trust is very, very important, as you mentioned. So what are the key security considerations in implementation of these agent tools for clients?
Yes. So obviously, when we think of the voice bots, agents, and so many implementations we may have, and the ways we can use them, we can imagine that it opens like the Pandora box of a lot of problems. So the biggest problem is the identity. That's the first thing. So the identity of a person who's interacting with the voice bot, right? So in the regular system of records, you basically log into the system, you have a certain permissions, and you have a certain access to the data, right? With VoiceBot, it becomes slightly more complex because, like, let's imagine we have like a medical VoiceBot. So log in once, and then you have the access to all of your, let's say, medical history. So it has to be protected in much more layers. So someone cannot take over your, let's say, session, your conversation, and takes out your basically data. So interacting with voice bots brings like another level of complexity in like how we have to think of security of the data, right?
Yes, and how do you handle this sensitive information in voice interactions like personal data or pricing? Are there any techniques?
I mean, in general, there are techniques which are typical for large language models, basically, and they can be really used in the kind of sense, in voice bots. So the first thing is how we store the data. Obviously, it should not lower the experience of someone who interacts with this voice bot, but when we are storing the data, we really have to remember that if it's a good idea, if we, for example, have a medical record and let's say the doctor is making the notes about the case with a name, a social security number, and everything put inside the one text field, right? So in reality, you have this form. Some data are, let's say, anonymized. Some data are available. In that case, you're like putting everything in one place, hoping that this data will stay protected. So there is a kind of technique of like anonymizing data. So users don't see it basically. So this doctor will not see the fact that only part of the data are stored in these text fields, and the other part of the data is really anonymized under like a tokens, or hidden way that they have done. Someone who's using the platform has actually no access to without certain permissions, right?
And how can we balance security and usability? Because let's assume that if we've implemented such solution, and on the one hand, we want to be secure, of course, but on the other hand, we don't want to slow down our sales reps with using these tools. So yes, there is a boundary between usability and security?
Definitely. I mean, I brought here the example from the medical kind of voice bots, but we're going back to the sales. Obviously, we should not have the same techniques with the sales because it's not that, I would say, fragile data, right? Sometimes some portion of those data are very fragile, like recording conversations with a customer and then analyzing sentiment and doing a lot of things on that data. That's obviously very fragile, and there is a certain level of vulnerability with that. So we have to balance the way that I think the experience matters. So basically, the person that is using the voice bot should not feel like there is some kind of a friction of usage, and everything has to be handled by some technical solution, right? So basically, in case of salespeople, they should probably log into the system, have been able to interact with a voice bot, and only in some parts of the system, for example, when they're asking a question about their performance, the voice bot should probably ask for some specific information, additional information, maybe some special ID or something to identify again the person that that talks to the voice bot, to really get the more let's say, vulnerable data.
Yeah, and let's say that we have such solution in a form of POC implemented in our organization. Right now we can think about going into production and to make it available to our sales team.
Yes.
So we can start think about scaling. So what factors scaling involves here?
I know that you're working on such projects where scaling is a huge part of it, and you can add your perspective to my answer. When I'm thinking of it, I'm actually thinking of two things. One is the kind of latency, right? So how fast the voice bot is interacting with us, and this should not be compromised because we have more and more users. So there is this infrastructure thing which has to be taken care of. So with more users, the experience is not going down. That's one thing. And there is also another thing which I think in scaling is extremely important is ability to really monitor how this voice bot is performing over time. What it means is that we need really the versioning. So taking the example from the typical like microservices, right, in IT, which mean that you have a system that is really like scattered around the smaller, let's say, functions that are doing the job. In that case, you have even much more complex situation because you don't only have the kind of functions, which can be, for example, tools, so the skills of an agent. You may have also different versions of the prompts. You may have different versions of the agents. So code has many layers of different versions. And then when we testing out how the voice bot is performing, we have to remember to be sure with which version of prompt, which version of agent, which version of the tool we are actually interacting with at the moment. So then we know what actually changed over time, because any small tweak, any small change in the voice bot behavior, agent behavior that's behind the voice bot is making sometimes a huge difference.
Yeah, and beyond the pure scale, where do you see these AI voice agents over the next few years?
Over the next few years, I think there's kind of two directions I can see. So for one is a kind of multimodality. So they will be doing more. So it's not only about conversation, processing our voice. I think there will be more like a processing the photos in the moment, also interacting with the charts, like doing a lot of things with the visual data, which is not now leveraged to that extent. And also the second thing next to that is that, so one was multimodality, the other, I think it's being autonomous. So we can't make those agents be autonomous from the day one, because they're like kind of like babies. They just have to learn how to walk. They just have to learn how to understand what we're saying to them. So they really need the time and a lot of data to be gathered first to behave more in autonomous way. So when I'm thinking of autonomous, I'm thinking of a use case where, for example, let's take this field salesperson. And every time they're going to the store and taking the photo of a shelf and analyzing what's on the shelf, they're always making this kind of a small note or task for themselves. And after many cases of like that, we can imagine that more autonomous voice bot could actually learn that every event of like analyzing photo also is followed then by putting the task. So what it can actually do for us, it just can automatically just tell us, okay, and you took the photo, we analyzed it, so I made a task for you for tomorrow.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about AI in the sales field, but are there any industries which can take advantage of these voice bots?
Obviously, I mean, I would say every kind of industry where there is a little bit of mobility, or when there is a lot of kind of, social interactions, I would say, they would actually benefit the most. So we can think of, for example, pharmacy, where you actually also have kind of salespeople going from, pharmacy store to the pharmacy store selling. We can actually also imagine the production line when you need something to, let's say, maybe tell you to your ear exactly what, explaining you what you see and how you can improve your job. So it's many use cases, including even the kind of services on the field that can benefit from having such assistant.
Yeah, and if you had to sum up, what's the biggest opportunity right now for these voice agents in sales right now?
I mean, the biggest opportunity right now, I think the future is in having the access to all of the data just with you everywhere, so you can make the decisions quickly. So everything that just makes you focusing on your actual job, so selling, is a kind of a future. So I can imagine that in a sales specifically, you have this coaching through the best person in the team, right? So you have people that really outperform entire team, and they're kind of like the benchmark for everyone else. So where I see the most opportunity is that the way those people behave, the way those people interact at their job can be just automatically taken and compared with the rest of the salespeople, right, sales team, and then they will be treated like as a kind of like a coaching example. So we can leverage the fact that they're the best salespeople we have and really use the data coming from them to teach the other group of people that is maybe less successful, but thanks to that information, they can actually be also successful. So it may bring the kind of a class of a super salespeople, and in every single field, I can see a similar thing, that those agents can actually make people really super great at their job at some point and make it even, basically. So we won't have the leaders, the laggards, everyone will actually perform at their best.
Okay, so thank you, Magda. Thank you for your time and for your insights. And for you, if you're interested in learning more about AI across different industries, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and follow us on social media. Thank you.